Is there a conflict between science and Christianity? You hear that all the time, don't you? You hear that the atheists have all the science on their side. I don't think that's true. What is science? Science is a method of inquiry that human beings use to discover cause and effect relationships in the universe. That's what science is. And there are two types of causes. There's intelligent causes, and there are natural causes. A natural cause might be the cause of the Grand Canyon. You don't have to suggest that some intelligent being stuck his finger down in the Arizona desert to create the canyon. But an intelligent cause is required for a geological formation like Mount Rushmore. Who created the faces on Mount Rushmore? Certainly not wind, rain, erosion. So the Grand Canyon would be an example of a natural cause, and Mount Rushmore would be an example of an intelligent cause. And here's the problem. Quite frequently, atheistic scientists rule out intelligent causes before they look at the evidence, particularly with regard to the evidence for the origin of the universe, the origin of first life, and the origin of subsequent life forms. Those are the three great arguments that Christians and atheists have. Where did we come from? Where did the universe come from? Where did life come from? Where did subsequent life forms come from? Those are all historical questions or forensic questions. If a scientist is already an atheist, it doesn't matter how much the evidence is pointing toward intelligence. He's always going to say it has to be a natural cause. Sometimes a Christian might be so biased one way that he might say, no matter how much the evidence points toward a natural cause, that God somehow did it. So both sides have to stop and reflect and see where the evidence really points. A friend of mine, Dr. John Lennox, has an illustration. When he asks his students in science class this question, imagine you have a Model T, a Ford Model T, an old Ford Model T in front of you. What caused the Ford Model T? And he says to his students, I'm only going to give you one possible cause: Henry Ford or the laws of internal combustion. And Dr. Lennox says his students say, well, Dr. Lennox, you need both. You need Henry Ford to create the Model T, and then you need the laws of internal combustion to allow it to continue to operate. If the laws of internal combustion changed every 10 minutes, the Ford Model T wouldn't work. And Dr. Lennox says, exactly. Did you ever notice that nature is goal-driven, that things are going in a direction, that the laws of nature themselves are goal-directed? Let me give you an example of this. You ever notice that an acorn always becomes an oak tree? Why does it always become an oak tree? Why doesn't it become an elm tree or a birch tree or a seahorse? Because it's programmed to become an oak tree. Now, is an acorn conscious? When an acorn is in the ground, is it thinking, gee, how do I become an oak tree? No, it reliably becomes an oak tree because if it doesn't have its own mind, and it doesn't, there must be an external mind, an external intellect directing it toward an end. Do you know that developmental biologists have done some research into fruit fly embryos, and they try and divert the fruit fly embryos to become something else early on in the embryonic stages? And what the fruit fly embryo always does is it makes heroic efforts to get back on track to become a fruit fly. And the scientists get one of three possible conclusions to these experiments. They either get a normal fruit fly, they get a mutant fruit fly, or they get a dead fruit fly. They don't even get a horse fly, much less a horse. Why? Because a fruit fly is goal-directed to become a fruit fly. Now, a fruit fly embryo is not conscious. It's not thinking about this. So if it doesn't have a mind that's directing it toward an end, there must be an external intellect directing it toward an end. That's what Aristotle called final causality. That's what Thomas Aquinas expanded on Aristotle's work and called it final causality. He called it his fifth way to argue for God. Why? Because there must be an external intellect directing all of these natural processes toward an end. That is why Paul, when he gets on Mars Hill, says, in him we live and move and have our being. And he says that in Christ all things are held together. And the writer of Hebrews says all this is held together by God's powerful word. God just doesn't create the universe and then leave it. God creates the universe and sustains it. Is science against Christianity? No. And it's not against atheism either, because science doesn't say anything scientists do. Which is why I can say without apology that science and Christianity are not at odds. God is a being necessary to create and sustain the very natural laws that allow us to do science.